welcome to News on the Hour. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. In the next 1 hour, we'll get you the top stories that we are tracking at this hour, starting with the climate deal being finally sealed at COP26, with India's take on coal usage being taken into consideration. Apart from this, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be transferring the first installment of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen to more than 1.47 lakh beneficiaries of Tripura today afternoon. This and much more up ahead, but first, the headlines. Glasgow Climate Pact adopted with further changes in the coal and fossil fuel subsidiaries. India proposed a last-minute amendment replacing coal phase-out with phase-down. Prime Minister Narendra Modi to transfer the first installment of Pradhan Mantri Grameen Awas Yojana to more than 1,47,000 beneficiaries in Tripura. Over 700 crore rupees will be transferred to the bank accounts of the beneficiaries. Union Home Minister Amit Shah to chair the Southern Zonal Council meeting at Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh. Representatives from the southern states and union territories to attend the meeting. Boundary disputes, security and infrastructure related matters to be discussed. India International Trade Fair to begin today at Pragati Maidan in New Delhi. IITF this year focuses on the theme Atmanirbhar Bharat. Bihar is the partner state. 9 countries including Bangladesh, Bahrain, Kyrgyzstan, Turkey, Sri Lanka and UAE are participating. And in sports, Australia to take on New Zealand in the final of the T20 World Cup in Dubai this evening. All right, let's begin with our top story. UN climate talks at Glasgow in Scotland ended with a global agreement aimed at keeping alive hopes of capping global warming at 1.5 degrees Celsius and so maintain a realistic shot at saving the world from the catastrophic climate change. Alok Sharma, the conference chairman, was visibly emotional before banging down his gavel in relief to signal that there were no vetoes from the almost 200 national delegations present in Glasgow, ranging from coal and gas-fueled superpowers to oil producers and Pacific Islands being swallowed by the rise in sea levels. Now, just before the Glasgow deal was adopted, there was last-minute drama as India, backed by China and other coal-dependent developing nations, raised objections to this part of the agreement and asked for the wording to be rewritten. India requested that the deal call on countries to phase down instead of phase out unabated coal. That minor word change triggered a lot of angst in the plenary hall, but delegations agreed to the request to save the deal. The clause was hurriedly amended to ask countries to accelerate their efforts towards a coal power phase down instead of phase out. The 2-week conference in Glasgow, which extended into an extra day of tortuous negotiations, was the 26th of its kind, but the first to call for a reduction in fossil fuels, which not only power much of the world's economy, but are also the main cause of man-made global warming. India, the voice of millions of people from developing countries, stands for equity and climate justice at the COP conference. In one of the strongest criticism of the COP26 draft deal, Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav said that developing nations had the right to use the remainder of the so-called global carbon budget, or the amount of carbon dioxide that the world can release before warming crosses the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold.
Every country will arrive at net zero as per its own national circumstances, strengths and weaknesses. Developing countries have a right to their fair share of the global carbon budget and are entitled to the responsible use of fossil fuels within this scope. In such a situation, how can anyone expect that developing countries can make promises about phasing out coal and fossil fuel subsidies? Developing countries have still to deal with their development agendas and poverty eradication. Towards this end, subsidies provide much needed social security and support. For example, we are giving subsidies for use of LPG to low-income households. This subsidy has been a great help in almost eliminating biomass burning for cooking and improved health from reduction in indoor air pollution.
Now, Union Environment Minister Bhupendra Yadav took aim at a draft deal at the United Nations Climate Summit on Saturday, saying he disagreed with the language on fossil fuel subsidies and that the draft lacked balance. He said the revision was needed to reflect the national circumstances of emerging economies.
I propose call upon parties to accelerate the development, deployment, and dissemination of technologies and adoption of policies to transition towards low-emission energy systems, including by rapidly scaling up deployment of clean power generation and energy efficiency measures, including accelerating effort to phase down unabated coal power and phase out inefficient fossil fuel subsidies while providing targeted support to the poorest and the most vulnerable in line with national circumstances and recognizing the need for support towards a just transition.
Now, after extending the COP26 climate negotiations an extra day, nearly 200 countries in Glasgow in Scotland adopted on Saturday an outcome document that, according to the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, reflects the interests, the contradictions and the state of political will in the world today. The UN chief added that it is time to go into emergency mode, ending fossil fuel subsidies, phasing out coal, putting a price on carbon, protecting vulnerable communities and delivering the $100 billion climate finance commitment. Guterres also had a message to young people, indigenous communities, women leaders and all those leading the charge on climate action that we are in the fight of our lives and this fight must never be given up.
The outcome of COP26 is a compromise. It reflects the interests, the contradictions, and the state of political will in the world today. It is an important step, but it's not enough. We must accelerate climate action to keep alive the goal of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. I want to send a message to young people, indigenous communities, women leaders, all those leading on climate action. I know you are disappointed, but the path of progress is not always a straight line. Sometimes there are detours. Sometimes there are ditches, but I know we can get there. We are in the fight of our lives, and this fight must be won.
Now, nearly 200 nations agreed to adopt the Glasgow Climate Pact on Saturday after more than 2 weeks of intense negotiations. The Glasgow Climate Pact was adopted with further changes in the coal and fossil fuel subsidies. The highlights of the pact are ratcheting up ambition. Now, the agreement acknowledges that commitments made by countries so far to cut emissions of planet-heating greenhouse gases are nowhere near enough to prevent planetary warming from exceeding 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial temperatures. To attempt to solve this, it asks governments to strengthen those targets by the end of next year rather than every 5 years, as was previously required. Now, targeting fossil fuels, the pact for the first time includes language that asks countries to reduce their reliance on coal and roll back fossil fuel subsidies, moves that would target the energy sources that scientists say are the primary drivers of man-made climate change. Payments to poor and vulnerable nations. The deal made some headway on the demands of the poor and vulnerable countries that wealthy countries responsible for most emissions pay up. The deal urges developed country parties to at least double their collective provision of climate finance for adaptation to developing country parties from 2019 levels by 2025. It also, for the first time, made mention of the so-called loss and damage in the cover section of the agreement. Loss and damage basically refers to the costs that some countries are already facing from climate change, and these countries have for years wanted payment to help deal with it. Now, under this deal, though developed countries have essentially just agreed to continue discussions on the topic. Now, we'll have to see where that leads. Rules for global carbon markets. Negotiators also closed a deal setting rules for carbon markets, potentially unlocking trillions of dollars for protecting forests, building renewable energy facilities, and other projects to combat climate change. Under the accord, some measures would be implemented to ensure credits are not double counted under national emissions targets, but bilateral trades between countries would not be taxed to help fund climate adaptation that had been a core demand for the less developed countries. What were the side deals? Well, there were a number of notable side deals as well. The United States and the European Union spearheaded a global methane cutting initiative in which around 100 countries have promised to reduce methane emissions by 30% from 2020 levels by 2030. United States and China, which are the world's two biggest carbon emitters, also announced a joint declaration to cooperate on climate change measures, a deal that reassured observers of Beijing's intention to accelerate its efforts to combat global warming after a long quiet period. Companies and investors also made a slew of voluntary pledges that would phase out gasoline-powered cars, decarbonize air travel, protect forests, and ensure more sustainable investing. Now, US climate envoy John Kerry said on Saturday that the world was closer than ever to avoiding climate chaos following the COP26 conference in Glasgow. Kerry also said that the conference raised ambition among the majority of the world's 20 biggest economies. Negotiators closed a deal setting rules for carbon markets at the United Nations COP26 climate talks on Saturday, potentially unlocking trillions of dollars for protecting forests, building renewable energy facilities, and other projects to combat climate change. Now, the final deal, which was adopted by nearly 200 nations, will implement Article 6 of the 2015 Paris Agreement. Companies as well as countries with vast forest cover had pushed for a robust deal on government-led carbon markets in Glasgow in the hope of also legitimizing the fast-growing global voluntary offset markets. Critics worry that offsetting could go too far in allowing countries to continue emitting climate-warming gases, making some wary of a hasty deal.
I really do believe that as a result of this decision and as a result of the announcements that have been made over the course of the last 2 weeks, we are in fact closer than we have ever been before to avoiding climate chaos and securing cleaner air, a safer water, and healthier planet.
All right, my colleague Tapash Bhattacharya, who has been tracking the COP26 conference for us, joins us now. Tapash, good morning. Finally, the deal has been reached by nearly 200 countries. And, of course, the whole tussle between developed and developing nations came to the fore when India made its demand of phasing down coal instead of phasing it out completely. Help us understand what really is the difference between phasing out and phasing down when India put this point forward.
Right. So, Shreya, the point is that if you take a close look at this particular COP26, you realize the fact that there were a lot of permutation and combination that were going on, and was the reason why it was delayed. But finally, the deal was stuck, and it's even though it is not something that a lot of environmentalists are really going gung-ho, but it has really made some sort of a major announcement. There are a few that you can take a major takeaways from this particular climate agreement. One of the main achievement of this particular text of this particular agreement is that it revisited the emission cutting plans and also keep it to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. that was the major key. A lot of people were saying that whether India and other countries will be able to keep that, and that is something that this particular COP26 has managed to do. So keeping the 1.5 degrees Celsius aim is still very much on the agenda, and it has been once again reiterated. Also, the first ever inclusion of a commitment to limit the use of coal. That was also something that a lot of countries were talking about. India, in particular, spoke about the fact that it is important to phase down rather than phase out, for the simple reason that India, along with other developing countries, are still very much, their economy is still very much based on coal, and that is one of the reasons why they use the term of phase down. And once again, the increasing financial help for developing countries, that was also reiterated very clearly. India has been one of the major voices in this particular COP26. It has made its voice heard, not just for itself, but also for the developing countries. Remember, when the West and the European Union, the US, has been talking about curbing the emission norms, they're forgetting two major important parts. First is that about climate finance, that even though it has been planned from 2009 onwards, not much of a headway has been made on that. So that was a major point that India has been raising in the COP26, and it has been recognized. And the fact that $100 billion that was supposed to be used every year has not been met. The target has not been met. So India
in
has
fact,
now
Tapash, yeah, that has been one of the main points of contention between developed and developing countries as well, that, there has been a target of $100 billion of climate financing, but that really doesn't come across. And of course, the deal also mentions the concept of loss and damage that the nations have agreed upon, that, all of the damage that developed nations have done in the past, they're supposed to pay up for that, for all the damage that has been caused due to their actions on developing countries, as well as, small islands that are really striving to survive. Yeah.
So, Shreya, that was the major sticking point. In fact, even in this COP26, the developed countries refused to get along with that, damage, loss and damage mechanism. They refused to go into that. Even though India, along with other developing countries, quite categorically spoke about the fact that it is their historical responsibility and historical mistake for which the countries are right now paying for. But that has not been taken into consideration the way it should have. The climate justice India has spoken about, and climate justice India has spoken about the mitigation measures, and it is one of the major reasons why even yesterday, all these things, even though India's economy is quite based on coal, India has spoken about the fact that it will phase down the usage of coal, and now the whole onus is on the developed countries to provide first the technology, the green technology. The second is the finance, the climate finance, to make sure that that all these things are provided to the developing countries to wean them out from the coal-based economy. So it is very important. It has, right start has been done. It is important to take the step forward and keep, as they have put the mechanism in place. It is important to put the check on those countries, especially the developed countries and China, whose record in this manner is quite awful, to keep a check on whether they have been fulfilling the commitment or not.
And one of the key concerns, of course, Tapash, of course, at a national level, at the country level, we all have to make our commitments. But when it comes to the individual level, the onus lies on us as well. And, companies and investors taking the pledge for, whether it is sustainable investments or decarbonizing air travel or taking out gasoline-powered cars, this is something that really points out towards individual responsibility as well when it comes to dealing with the climate challenge.
Let's put it this way, Shreya, that this is not just a responsibility of big corporates or, for that matter, the government. It is a responsibility of every individual, every person, everyone, living in the planet. If you want to live in the planet, if you want to save the planet, and that is something, just to put it, if the if the temperature rises by margin, most of the top countries, including developed countries, will go under sea, and that is a major cause of concern. And that's something that the environmentalists have been talking about. That it is not just the developing countries; it's the developed countries also who will be, who will have to bear the brunt. Just to put a point across, United States, New Orleans, Georgetown, Savannah, Amsterdam in Netherlands, Italy, in Venice in Italy, all these cities, all the major cities which are on the banks of in many seas or on the ocean, near the oceans, are in the danger of getting submerged. It will have a cascading effect on the environment, on the planet, on the climate. So it is the responsibility of every individual to come forward to save the planet. And that is where the pressure was mounted on the developed countries to deliver on the promises. And India, as I had mentioned earlier, has led the voices of those whose voices have so far not been heard. The like-minded group of countries have come really forward in this particular COP26 and have managed to come out with a what you could say agreement that can actually save the planet.
Absolutely, and I think that explains the very symbolic but very impactful, significant stand that the Tuvalu's foreign minister took when he stood in the sea to deliver his climate change COP26 speech, to really show that Pacific Islands and the whole of the world can really be impacted by the climate change challenge. Tapash Bhattacharya, thanks very much for joining us with all those inputs on the COP26 conference agreement that has finally been sealed. Moving on, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Saturday praised the achievements of the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow. In a pre-recorded speech released by 10 Downing Street, Johnson has said that the great news is that together the world has made some important breakthroughs. We've kept alive the hope of restricting the growth in temperatures to 1.5 degrees, and we've made huge progress on coal, cars, cash and trees. For the first time ever, we've got over 190 countries all agreeing to sound the death knell for coal power. Defining COP26 as the moment humanity finally got real about climate change, Johnson has acknowledged that the Glasgow summit has not found a solution to climate change, yet provided a viable roadmap to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees.
Great news is, together, the world has made some important breakthroughs. We've kept alive the hope of restricting the growth in temperatures to 1.5 degrees. And we've made huge progress on coal, cars, cash and trees. For the first time ever, we've got over 190 countries all agreeing to sound the death knell for coal power. And tonight, the developed world has finally acknowledged the need to help poorer and vulnerable nations to deal with the loss and damage that's already being caused by climate change. Everyone has agreed that emissions targets need to keep getting tougher over the next decade, and that we need to keep going faster to reach those targets.
All right, we're heading for a short break right now, but news and updates continue on the other side. Stay tuned.
नमस्ते लैंड
मरहबन इलल हिंद
जरी इंडिया
सलाम इंडिया नमस्ते इंडिया
नमस्कार भारत
नहनु हुनूर इंडिया माँ हिंदी हस्ती हिंदियानी सलाम हिंदुस्तान वी आर इंडिया
Your window
to Rising India, India's voice on global platforms. Latest news from India and around the world. In-depth analysis of global headlines. Watch DD India in your country. Available for downlink in all Southeast Asian countries. STTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT-17 at 93.5 degrees east. HDTV broadcast is available through the satellite GSAT-10 at 83 degrees east. For technical details, scan here. Switch to DD India now.
Welcome back to News on the Hour. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will transfer the first installment of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen to more than 1.47 lakh beneficiaries of Tripura at 1 o'clock via video conferencing today. More than 700 crore rupees will be credited directly to the bank accounts of the beneficiaries on the occasion. Following Prime Minister's intervention, taking into account the unique geoclimatic conditions of Tripura, the definition of Kacha house has been changed specifically for the state. This has enabled a large number of beneficiaries living in Kacha houses to get assistance for the construction of a Pakka house. Union Home Minister Amit Shah will chair the Southern Zonal Council meeting at Tirupati in Andhra Pradesh today. Representatives from the southern states and union territories will attend the meeting. During the meeting, officials will discuss a broad range of issues, including boundary disputes, security and infrastructure-related matters like road, transport, industries, water and power. The Southern Zonal Council comprises Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Kerala, Telangana and the Union Territories of Puducherry, Lakshadweep and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Zonal Councils provide a platform to foster such collaboration through a structured mechanism for dialogue and discussion continuously on the issues affecting two or more states or the centre and the states in the spirit that strong states make a strong nation. Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy is the Vice Chairman as well as the host. Other Chief Ministers from the states in the zone along with 2 ministers each are the members. Moving on, there have been news reports that there have been circulating that a mosque in Kakraban area of Gomati district in Tripura has been damaged and vandalized. The Home Ministry in a release has said that these news reports are fake and are a complete misrepresentation of facts. The mosque in Dargah Bazaar area has not been damaged and the Tripura police in Gomati district is working to maintain peace and tranquility. Now, there is no reported case of damage of the structure of any masjid in Tripura in the recent past. There is no report of a simple or grievous injury or rape or death of any person in these incidents as alleged in some social media posts. People should maintain calm and should not be misguided by such fake reports. For instance, in Maharashtra, there have been reports of violence and unsavory statements that are aimed at disturbing peace and harmony based on fake news regarding Tripura. This is a very concerning news and it is urged that peace is maintained at all costs. In other news, an update now on the nationwide COVID-19 vaccination drive. With the administration of 57,43,840 vaccine doses in the last 24 hours, India's COVID-19 vaccination coverage has exceeded 102.01 crore. This has been achieved through 1,14,65,001 sessions. An update now on the COVID-19 situation from across the country. The recovery of 11,376 patients in the last 24 hours has increased the cumulative tally of recovered patients to 3,38,37,859. Consequently, India's recovery rate stands at 98.26%. 11,271 new cases were reported in the last 24 hours. The active caseload is presently at 1,35,918, which is the lowest in 522 days. Active cases presently constitute 0.39% of the country's total positive cases, which is the lowest since March 2020. The testing capacity across the country continues to be expanded. The last 24 hours saw a total of 12,55,904 tests being conducted. India has so far conducted over 62.37 crore cumulative tests. While testing capacity has been enhanced across the country, the weekly positivity rate at 1.01% remains less than 2% for the last 51 days now. The daily positivity rate, reported to be 0.9%, has remained below 2% for the last 41 days and below 3% for 76 consecutive days now. All right, news from down south now. Heavy rainfall continues in southern and central parts of Kerala. The IMD has issued an orange alert in 7 districts, including Thiruvananthapuram, Kollam, Pathanimtha, Alappuzha, Kottayam, Idukki and Kasaragod. A yellow alert is issued in rest of the 7 districts. The Disaster Response Authority had taken necessary precautions across the state. The hilly regions are witnessing heavy rainfall and people are being shifted to relief camps from the disaster-prone areas. The Met forecasts heavy rainfall till the 16th of November, and fishermen have been warned from venturing into sea in the Kerala-Lakshadweep coast. Meanwhile, at least 17 people have lost their lives in rain-related incidents in the neighbouring Tamil Nadu. The natural calamity has also resulted in the destruction of a large number of houses, and the torrential downpour in Chennai has added to the woes of the common people. The Met Office has meanwhile predicted heavy rainfall in the Nilgiris for some more days. All right, coming back to the national capital, the India International Trade Fair 2021 will be inaugurated by Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal at Pragati Maidan in Delhi. Now, the theme of this year's fair is Atmanirbhar Bharat, or Self-Reliant India. Bihar is the partner state, whereas Uttar Pradesh and Jharkhand are the focus states in this year's fair. Over 1,500 exhibitors from India and overseas are participating with the display of a large range of products and services. 23 states, UTs and 34 central ministries, commodity boards, PSUs and government departments are participating in the event. As many as 9 foreign countries, including Bangladesh, Bahrain, Ghana, Kyrgyzstan, Tunisia, Turkey, Sri Lanka and UAE are participating in the fair. Now, the event will be organized in safe and secure environment with all COVID protocols in place. The first 5 days of the trade fair are exclusively reserved for business days, and it will open to the general public from the 19th till the 27th of November. The timings of the fair will be 9:30 a.m. till 7:30 p.m. and the trade fair will continue till the 27th of November. Now, remember, the fair that is held annually and which witnesses a record footfall was not held last year due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Keeping with news from Delhi, the national capital woke up to a haze once again. As per the System of Air Quality and Weather Forecasting and Research under the Ministry of Earth Science, there is a mild improvement in the air quality index. The AQI in Delhi stands at 342, which now falls under the very poor category that was earlier in the severe category for 9 consecutive days. People in the city that fall under the sensitive group or people with breathing illnesses have been advised to avoid all physical activities outdoor and move towards indoor activities. If you are asthmatic, then keep a relief medicine handy. As per the guidelines, if citizens wish to step out, they must wear masks. Specifically, masks known as N95 or P100 respirators have been suggested. We now take you on a breathtaking journey of the evergreen hill station of Mechuka in Arunachal Pradesh, which is seeing a rapid homestay development. So what are you waiting for? Just pack your bags and head to enjoy the beauty of Mechuka, where one gets sunrise first in India, and with strategic importance of Mechuka's location close to the international border with China, tourism is coming of age here, and in future, tourism will surely catch up.
Homestays are rapidly becoming popular in Mechuka, a prominent hill station of Arunachal Pradesh. This has led to tourists getting acquainted with the local cuisine, lifestyle and art and culture more closely on the one hand, while local people are getting livelihood opportunities in tourism sector on the other hand.
जो खाना पीना जो भी मतलब अरेंजमेंट या हॉस्पिटलिटी देना सब हम लोग ये अपना गवर्नमेंट ऑफ वाटर डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ टूरिज्म ने हमको ट्रेनिंग दिया था तो मल्टी केयर मतलब ये होम स्टे का उसका भी ट्रेनिंग दिया हमको तो ये ट्रेनिंग का द्वारा हमको बहुत बेनिफिट हुआ है तो हम अभी मतलब हम ये वेल सर्व कर सकते हैं किसी मतलब होस्ट गेस्ट को तो इसलिए हम गवर्नमेंट ऑफ अरुणाचल प्रदेश डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ टूरिज्म को हम सबसे पहले धन्यवाद देते हैं.
The Arunachal Pradesh government is providing subsidy-based financial assistance for self-employment as well as skill development of selected unemployed youth for promoting homestays.
शुरू में जो है इसका बारे में अवेयर नहीं था यहाँ का आदमी लोग पब्लिक लोग अवेयर नहीं था तो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ टूरिज्म ने बहुत सारा अवेयरनेस कैंप किया है उसका वजह से जो है एक दो स्टार्ट किया था उससे शुरुआत होते होते अभी जो है हम लोग का सीओमी में जो है 43 होम स्टे रजिस्टर्ड होम स्टे है ये डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ टूरिज्म का अंदर में रजिस्टर्ड है और ये जो है तो उसमें से जो है 3 जो है हम लोग का सीओमी का हेडक्वार्टर डिस्ट्रिक्ट हेडक्वार्टर तातो में है और बाकी जो है ये मेचुका में.
Monigong in Shiomi district near the international border with China is witnessing development of homestays that are being prominently given importance at various remote tourist places. Tourists from home and abroad come to Mechuka's evergreen valleys to enjoy as well as indulge in some adventure tourism. Dinesh Kumar's report from Itanagar for DD India.
Well, every day DD India brings you a special story on India's freedom struggle in which we remember our freedom fighters and heroes. In today's episode of Saga of Freedom, we will pay tribute to the first Prime Minister of independent India, Jawaharlal Nehru, and we will also talk about Marathwada public leader Anantrao Bhalerao and one of the founding members of the Swatantra Party, Pilu Modi.
Jawaharlal Nehru, first Prime Minister of independent India, was born on November the 14th, 1889 at Allahabad. After getting educated at home until the age of 16, Nehru went to Harrow, a leading English school, where he stayed for 2 years. From Harrow, he went to Trinity College, Cambridge.
On leaving Cambridge, he qualified as a barrister after 2 years at the Inner Temple, London. On his return to India, Nehru at first tried to settle down as a lawyer, but he was an unsuccessful attorney.
Until he met Mahatma, he was not interested in anything. Jawaharlal was attracted by Gandhi's insistence to fight against the British rule of India without fear or hate. Nehru's role in Indian politics was secondary until he was elected president of the Congress Party in 1929, when he presided over the historic session at Lahore that proclaimed complete independence as India's political goal.
Nehru was one of the principal leaders of India's independence movement in the 1930s and 40s. From the year 1921 to 1945, he served 8 periods of detention, totaling 9 years in jail. Post-independence, Jawaharlal was elected to assume office as independent India's first Prime Minister.
Long years ago, we made a pact with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom.
As the Prime Minister of the new Republic, Nehru contributed immensely towards building a democratic polity, planned economy and industrial development. He also focused on high education institutions and far-sighted policies in developing space technology and atomic energy.
He served as the Prime Minister for 18 years, first as the interim Prime Minister and from 1950 as the Prime Minister of the Republic of India. Nehru also became noted for his neutralist, non-aligned policies in foreign affairs. Jawaharlal Nehru passed away on 27th of May 1964.
A widely admired author, his books written in prison such as Letters from a Father to His Daughter, an autobiography, and The Discovery of India 1946 are still read around the world.
Marathwada public leader Anantrao Bhalerao was born on 14th of November 1918 in Aurangabad, Maharashtra, fondly known as Anna. He was a journalist who lived a valued life. He jumped into the Hyderabad liberation struggle movement at a young age, for which he was imprisoned.
In 1944, he started an agitation against the Nizam government's compulsion to recover levies. Anant Rao, along with Vaghmare, edited the newspaper Marathwada. Anant Rao took the role of protecting the rights of the people by presenting the complaints of the people in the Marathwada newspaper and exposing the injustice done to them.
The paper was banned in the state of Hyderabad. On 15th of August 1947, a call was made to carry out satyagraha by hosting tricolour flags in homes and public places. This led to a scuffle with the Nizam's armed police.
Anant Rao had led all these battles. With the ending of Nizam's rule in 1948, Marathwada was relaunched. Anna also had to go to the Nasik jail once again during the emergency in 1975. Anant Rao died on the 26th of October 1995. He is remembered as a great public leader and nationalist journalist even today.
14th of November is also the birth anniversary of Pilu Modi. Modi was an architect and politician and one of the founding members of the Swatantra Party. He was educated at the Doon School, Dehradun, and the University of California, Berkeley, from where he graduated with a master's degree in architecture.
In political life, Modi was an advocate of liberalism and freedom. In 1967, he was elected to the 4th Lok Sabha, representing the Godhra constituency in Gujarat. In 1971, he was re-elected and served in the 5th Lok Sabha until March 1977. In 1975, at the time of the emergency in India, Modi was imprisoned. On the 10th of April 1978, Modi was elected to the Rajya Sabha and served there until his death in 1983.
And Children's Day is being celebrated today. The day is celebrated across the country to increase awareness of the rights, care and education of children. It is celebrated on 14th November every year on the birth anniversary of the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has paid his tributes to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru on his birth anniversary today. And slipping into a short break again, see you on the other side.
As the day unfolds and news and events take shape, we get you complete coverage of every news breaking in, tracking new developments as they happen. Midday Prime English, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. on DD India.
Welcome back. Let's now take a look at the updates on the COVID-19 situation from across the world. The coronavirus has infected more than 25 crore 36 lakh people worldwide. So far, the number of recoveries stand above 22 crore 93 lakh, while over 51 lakh 10,000 people have lost their lives to the virus globally. United States alone continues to contribute the majority of the cases of COVID-19 in the world's tally. The country's COVID-19 cases have crossed 4 crore 78 lakh and the death toll stands over 7 lakh 83,000. The Netherlands is entering a partial lockdown after a sharp increase in coronavirus infections. Shops, bars and restaurants will close early for 3 weeks, while crowds won't be allowed at sporting events. Europe reported almost 2 million cases last week, which is the most in a single week in the region since the pandemic started. It also accounted for more than half of all COVID deaths globally last week. Reacting to the announcement made by the Netherlands caretaker Prime Minister Mark Rutte on Friday, residents of Amsterdam were divided on the effectiveness of the upcoming measurements. Supermarkets and non-essential retailers will close earlier and social distancing measures will be reimposed. Friday's announcement marked a dramatic change of policy for the Dutch government, which until last month had thought that a relatively high vaccination rate would allow it to further ease measures towards the end of the year. Moving on, at least 68 prisoners were killed and more than 24 injured in overnight violence at Ecuador's Penitenciaria del Litoral prison in what officials characterize as fights among rival gangs. The penitentiary, located in the southern city of Guayaquil, is the same prison where 119 inmates were killed in late September in the country's worst ever incident of prison violence. The government has blamed disputes between drug trafficking gangs for control of prisons for the violence. Dozens were gathered outside the prison waiting for news of loved ones who many said they had not heard from since Friday afternoon. Relatives of inmates have said that President Guillermo Lasso must do more to help the poor. Ecuador's prison system has come under harsh spotlight in recent years for overcrowding, poor sanitary conditions and organized crime. Belarusian troops reinforcing the border area as the standoff with migrants continued. The video showed dozens of Belarusian troops walking along a wired fence across the border from Poland's Kuznica region. Thousands of migrants from the Middle East are sheltering in freezing conditions on the border between Belarus and EU states Poland and Lithuania, which are refusing to let them cross. At least 8 of them have already died, and fears are growing for the safety of others as harsh winter conditions set in. The body of a young Syrian man has been found in Poland near the border with Belarus. The international tension is growing over the crisis, with neighbors of Belarus warning that the situation could escalate into a military conflict. Thousands of Sudanese took to the streets on Saturday in the capital Khartoum and many cities 2 days after Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan announced a new ruling council that excludes the civilian coalition the military had been sharing power with since 2019. In a sign, authorities may be stepping up efforts to quash a campaign of planned protests and civil disobedience. Security forces moved to disperse protesters as soon as they began to gather in the early afternoon. They fired tear gas and chased demonstrators down side streets to prevent them reaching central meeting points. Previously, security forces had waited until later in the day before moving in. 5 protesters were killed on Saturday as huge crowds defied gunfire and tear gas in Sudan's capital Khartoum and other cities to demonstrate against a military takeover. Now, most protesters dispersed of their own accord around sunset, though tear gas and gunfire continued in Khartoum North as security forces arrested protesters and removed their barricades. News from Indonesia now, where a fire has broken out at a fuel storage unit at the country's Pertamina refinery complex in Cilacap in central Java. Pertamina has launched intensive efforts to extinguish the fire and prevent it from spreading, adding that it will evacuate people residing closest to the refinery to a safer location. Now, the cause of the fire is not yet known. Pertamina spokesperson Hepibul Ansari said that the fire had only affected the storage unit and the company was monitoring the situation before deciding whether it might be necessary to shut the refinery. Cilacap refinery is one of Pertamina's biggest refining facilities with a capacity of 348,000 barrels per day. Meanwhile, in Thailand, soldiers saved and evacuated residents during flash floodings in Chumphon province, the southern part of the country. About 10 soldiers held onto a rope while one soldier was seen clinging to the rope over rushing flood waters and eventually pulling people on a boat to safety across the riverbank. Local media reported at least 2 deaths and almost 5,000 people were severely impacted by the flood that started on Friday. Persistent rainfall in mid-October 2021 has brought more flooding to central and northeastern Thailand, where rivers and reservoirs were already running high. In late September and early October, tropical storm Dianmu inundated the region, leading to flash flooding and the activation of the International Disaster Charter. Moving to United States now, a severe thunderstorm swept across the New York metro area on Saturday, dropping dime-sized hail across the 5 boroughs and sending a possible tornado across Long Island. Wind gusts up to 50 meters per hour knocked down trees throughout the region, including one that blocked traffic on the Long Island Expressway at the Douglaston Parkway. At least 2 more fell on subway tracks on the Q like at Avenue M in Brooklyn and the A line in Far Rockaway. The National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for parts of Long Island as the thick black clouds moved across Nassau County. Residents in the New York area surveyed the damage after an intense storm uprooted trees, damaged property and left thousands without power on Saturday afternoon. Several thousand Long Island residents were left without power. Meanwhile, 2 tornadoes touched down in Connecticut, causing extensive damage. The storm left up to 9,000 people without power in Connecticut. The Prince of Wales, politicians and members of the royal family have paid their tributes to those who died in conflict at the Festival of Remembrance. Prince Charles, the Duchess of Cornwall and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge marked the annual event at London's Royal Albert Hall, although the Queen did not attend. However, she is expected to attend the cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday. This year's event commemorated 100 years of the Royal British Legion. The festival is dedicated to those who have served and sacrificed their lives from Britain and the Commonwealth.
Inaccessible parts of the world. Also heavily involved in the emergency air.
November 14th marks World Diabetes Day. World Diabetes Day provides an opportunity to raise awareness of diabetes as a global public health issue and what needs to be done collectively and individually for better prevention, diagnosis and management of the condition. WHO and partners have used the opportunity of the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin to highlight the huge gap between the people who need access to insulin to control their diabetes as well as essential technologies.
It's not serious.
Now, United Nations via Twitter advises that exercise, eating healthy and avoiding tobacco are simple actions that can help prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. The World Health Organization has released a video spreading awareness about the types of diabetes, how to identify them and what all behaviors to adopt to make life easier with diabetes. Well, shifting focus to sports now, the final of the ICC Men's T20 World Cup will see the Trans-Tasman rivalry as Australia and New Zealand will battle it out in the summit clash at the Dubai International Stadium today. Now, interestingly, neither of the 2 teams stepped into the tournament as favourites. However, they played some quality cricket and made a place in the finals. News from football now. Belgium secured Group E victory and their place in Qatar with a comfortable 3-1 win over Estonia. The Belgians climbed to an unassailable 19 points as Christian Benteke scored early and Yannick Carrasco and Thorgan Hazard added second-half goals. They joined Brazil, Denmark, France and Germany among the first 5 countries to qualify for next year's finals and travelled to Cardiff on Tuesday to face Wales, who fought Belarus 5-1. And Kylian Mbappe scored his first international hat-trick inside 32 minutes as France picked apart Kazakhstan 8-0 in Group D and booked their place in the finals. Mbappe became the first France player in 36 years to score 3 goals or more in a competitive game to secure a place in Didier Deschamps' side at next year's World Cup. And music gives a soul to the universe, wings to the mind, flight to imagination and life to everything. Before we end this edition of News on the Hour, we leave you with these melodies from Venezuela, where a massive group of 12,000 musicians performed, all set to break a world record. Absorb these tunes and rejuvenate this beautiful Sunday. Thank you very much for joining us right now. Namaskar.